Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Hideouts. Today's guest, the infamous Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Before we begin the story, I just want to let you know that this build that you're enjoying, well, hopefully, is the home that Benjamin purchased in Beverly Hills after quite a bit of success in his life, and he lived here with his wife and 2 daughters for a period of time. We'll get more into that story momentarily, but enjoy. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was born February 28, 1906 in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York, as the second of 5 children in a Jewish family. His parents were Jenny and Max Siegel, and they had emigrated from Austria-Hungary to the United States to make a life for themselves, but it was fairly meager, as are most of the stories that we cover in this period of time in the United States. Benjamin was a restless child who left school to join a gang on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Most of his crimes were petty theft at the time, but that soon changed as he made friends with hoodlum Mo Sedway. Together they created a little business wherein they would threaten to set fire to pushcart salesmen's merchandise unless they were paid $1. They made a good deal of money and also created a very long criminal record during their teenage years. While still a teenager, Siegel approached Meyer Lansky, who had been involved in mob activities. He expanded his business to gambling and car theft. Contemporary Lucky Luciano decided that it was time for the Jewish boys to become more organized, like the Irish and Italian crime families. He had seen what Siegel was up to and recruited him immediately. As a side note, I want to point out that even in his early life, there are not a lot of details about this man except for his criminal activity, which I found both interesting and slightly disturbing. Continuing, he helped the bootlegging operations all along the East Coast and eventually became a hitman for the mob. The men in this gang were responsible for hijacking liquor shipments and killing rival gang members left and right. Siegel was fearless and would defend his fellow gang members fiercely. He was, not surprisingly, a childhood friend of Al Capone. When Capone had a warrant out for his arrest, one of many, Siegel hid him in his aunt's home. Siegel smoked opium as a young man and began to get involved with the drug world, making sales that provided him with enough money to dress in a very flashy way and buying an apartment at the Waldorf Astoria, in addition to a Tudor-style home located in Scarsdale, New York. He was constantly seen out and about among the elite, enjoying New York City nightlife. In May of 1929, now often called Bugsy by his enemies, he met with Meyer, Luciano, and gang leader Johnny Torrio for a conference regarding the future of the mafia crime families. During this meeting, Siegel vowed that there would be no more trouble between the Jewish and Italian families. In the late 1920s, Siegel had close ties to the Genovese crime family, which had been rising in power, and after a couple of high-profile hits were completed, Lucky Luciano had established his place at the top of the mafia, thus beginning the golden age of modern American organized crime. On January 28, 1929, Siegel married Esta Krakauer, his childhood sweetheart. They went on to have 2 daughters named Millicent and Barbara. Due to his philandering personality, the marriage was rocky, and the womanizing Bugsy eventually granted Esta a divorce. She moved back to New York with her daughters, and even though they'd been living in California, they wanted to return back to their roots, and that is where they remained. During his courtship with Esta, Bugsy had been building a relationship with Lansky, as well as Luciano and Frank Costello, both future bosses of the Genovese crime family. After a couple of high-profile hits had been carried out on rival bosses, Lansky and Luciano founded the National Crime Syndicate. They further established the Commission, which was a committee or governing body comprised of crime family bosses who would make decisions and uphold territories that had been split between warring factions of the mafia. This was done to avoid future wars between gangs. The commission would enter into a large number of incidents between crime families, and even a trial accusing 5 families of various crimes against the state of New York. This all came about because of an FBI wiretap of several of the men working for the 5 main mafia families. It was 1931 when the deadly Castellamarese War happened. It was a bloody struggle for power. The balance was shifting, and Bugsy was ready to establish Murder, Inc. He ran a murder-for-hire business that was quite lucrative, never convicted except in Miami in 1932, and that was for gambling and vagrancy. We've heard a similar story with our friend Capone, who committed every possible crime imaginable and perpetrated murder left and right, only to be convicted of tax evasion and fraud. Ironic, but it happened here as well. So it was gambling and vagrancy. They held him and they gave him a fine for $100. So what do you think he did? He simply pulled out his huge bankroll and pulled a $100 bill, a crisp $100 bill, out of his jacket pocket and handed it over to pay his fine. And he walked free. Bugsy was a fierce and passionate personality. He had a falling out with the Fabrizio brothers and created an elaborate plot to do away with them after he felt that he and his associates had been wronged. Bugsy's fast and loose behavior had put him at risk. Friends were worried for his safety and urged him to leave town. He did, and he landed in Los Angeles, California. He wasted no time in taking over rackets like illegal gambling and drug routes in and out of Mexico. By 1942, the syndicate's gambling and bookmaking was raking in $500,000 a day. Siegel was controlling several offshore casinos and a prostitution ring. Professionals from all walks of life became his pawns. He controlled members of the police force, lawyers, businessmen who would protect him or turn a blind eye, and accountants, everyone, all walks of life. They all let him get away with everything he was doing, and he had his finger in several pies at that point in time. Siegel decided to become a part of Hollywood society, and he rubbed shoulders with names like Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, and Cary Grant. He was a close friend of Jean Harlow, who eventually became the godmother of his daughter Millicent. He had become a larger-than-life figure, and young celebrities such as Tony Curtis and Frank Sinatra looked up to this powerful man. Siegel couldn't be present among Hollywood's elite without finding a way to exploit them, however, so he came up with a plan to extort money from the movie studios. He took over the local trade unions and staged union strikes so that the studios would have to pay them off to get the actors back to work. He also managed to borrow over $400,000 from celebrities who never saw their money again and wouldn't dream of asking for it back. And he knew it. In November of 1939, Bugsy and his gang killed a man named Harry Greenberg for threatening to become a police informant. He was put on trial for the murder, but witnesses kept disappearing, and no one else would come forward. The case was dismissed over insufficient evidence, but during the trial, Siegel was allowed to leave prison for appointments, such as the dentist, and refused to eat the food, as well as being allowed female visitors. He was treated like a celebrity, and the newspapers started calling him Bugsy during this period of his life. He hated the term since he associated it with the word bugs, which meant crazy or erratic. He wanted to be called Ben or Mr. Siegel, but that name stuck. He was tried and acquitted for other crimes during the next decade, always escaping justice. But his reputation had been damaged, so Bugsy decided to reinvent himself. He went to Las Vegas in 1945 and began a spending spree of epic proportion by finding the finest opportunities available in the post-war climate. He ran out of money and began bouncing checks, but his rough reputation and ego somehow allowed him to continue. And on December 26, 1946, Siegel opened the infamous Flamingo Hotel. It was a glitzy casino, but the grand opening was a huge failure. Hollywood stars either failed to appear due to weather and other excuses, or they came and did not have enough room to stay. Strange, since it was a hotel. But there weren't enough rooms, and so they took their winnings and went elsewhere. This particular first week cost the casino a $300,000 loss in their first week of operation. They closed after a second week. Siegel was resourceful and found new partners to help with the project. He reopened it in March of 1947 and had renamed it the Fabulous Flamingo to honor his girlfriend, Virginia Hill, since her nickname was the Flamingo due to her long legs and red hair. Eventually, Siegel pushed out his primary investor, began turning a profit, and drawing people with money to burn to his resort. His wealthy investor was later found dead. The crime remains unsolved, but most speculate that Bugsy's men took care of him. The casino still exists as the Flamingo Las Vegas. Siegel made a name for himself as one of the original criminals to build Las Vegas into the mecca of vice and greed that it is today. On June 20th, 1947, Siegel was relaxing in his Beverly Hills home with his girlfriend, Virginia. He had been long divorced by now, well, at least a year, and he had an associate there as well, named Alan Smiley. He was sitting on the sofa reading the Los Angeles Times. Shots came tearing through the wall and the window, hitting Benjamin Siegel multiple times, twice in the head. I think there were 9 shots in total. The bullets belonged to an M1 carbine, .30 caliber military-style weapon. No one has ever been caught or charged with the assassination. There's so much speculation about who was sent to kill Siegel, and one of the primary theories is that the syndicate's board of directors met in Havana, Cuba, and made a decision to put out a contract on Siegel's life due to his exorbitant spending in the past year, and in an unstable economy that cost them dearly. The Los Angeles coroner's report stated that the cause of death was a cerebral hemorrhage, death by homicide. The day after his murder, his associates took over the Flamingo, and newspapers around the country print photos of his lifeless body, bloody and slumped over in his living room. The Los Angeles Herald-Express print only a single photo of Siegel's exposed right foot with the morgue's toe tag on it to announce the death of Benjamin Siegel. In New York City's Lower East Side at the Bialystoker Synagogue, there is a yahrzeit, a memorial, and 2 plaques, one for Benjamin and one for his father, Max, who passed away just 2 months before him. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel is interred at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Hollywood, California. And I have a fun fact. In the 1972 classic film The Godfather, based on a novel by Mario Puzo in 1969, the character of Mo Green was based on Benjamin Siegel as the casino mogul of Las Vegas. If you haven't seen The Godfather, well, I'm sorry, because it's amazing. And also, it's a fairly accurate portrayal of a lot of the things that went on between the crime families, albeit a little bit Hollywood romanticized. Siegel's been portrayed in multiple television series, films, and even an HBO series. Not all of the portrayals are accurate, nor do they agree on the type of man he was, but he left his mark on our world, as well as a legacy of the high life, entertainment, and gambling in Las Vegas. So that is the story. Told you there wasn't a whole lot of personal detail there, but yeah, he was an interesting man. I hope you're enjoying the build so far. I hope you've enjoyed the photographs I've been able to include from Benjamin's life. I'll call him Benjamin. I feel like we're close now. But this was a huge build, and it was difficult only because I do lots of huge builds and I love doing them, but they're usually quite opulent. Bugsy's house, although it was in Beverly Hills and fairly large, was, I don't want to say it was decorated in poor taste, but it definitely wasn't how I would decorate a house of this size, and it was beautiful from the outside. So I tried very hard to make it kind of dumpy in places. And you see that I tried to recreate his front room, his living room, as accurately as possible. There was a candelabra spotted in one of the photos on the piano that I'm showing here. I've shown that photo as well. So you're able to see everything as best as I could recreate it. I could not recreate his very cool windows out front. I end up changing them from what they are currently. And there is quite a bit left to do upstairs, strangely enough. But that was also, there weren't a whole lot of photos of the upstairs. I kind of improvised a little bit there and gave them something that I thought they might enjoy in their status. Like a designer walk-in closet for Bugsy and Esta. He didn't like being called Bugsy. Never mind. Anyway, the girls have their own rooms. They didn't live in this house for very long, but they were teens when they were there. So I kind of tried to give them a more adult, sparsely decorated bedroom as well. Really enjoyed just finishing this build and moving on to making the family. And I did try to recreate them as best as possible, as I always do from photographs that you will also see. That you have seen. Actually, you've already seen them. So I did not include the girls because there aren't a lot of photos. There is one high school photo of Barbara, and all of the pictures I could find of Millicent were older photos when she was older, not photos from her childhood. So I would have included those if I found ones that I thought represented them as children a little bit better, but I didn't. I did include Esta and our beautiful Benjamin Siegel. Let me know what you think. What do you think of his story? Do you feel like maybe he had a big heart in there and he was just misled? Or do you really feel like he was a criminal through and through? Do you think he was just a bad person, an evil person? Based on the details in the story, I didn't give you everything. As always, there's never enough time to give everything. So I'm going to let you enjoy the build. I will also say that I am going to, as always, include links. So there will be links to the clip from The Godfather where they depict him as Mo Green in the film. There will also be some links to biographical information on him. There's actually several pages. I found some stuff on the History Channel about his casino, the Flamingo. If you're interested in looking at some more of that, I have inserted photos, but there's lots more online that you can check out. And of course, if you're interested looking into films of his life and series that they've used, his life story in, including an HBO series, as I mentioned, you can look all of those things up. I will have as much of it listed as I can, and I encourage you to look into it and just learn about our history and get involved. It's a really interesting and it's an intriguing part of our history. Not to say that it's over, but this was the heyday of the mafia and crime families, and it's glorified and romanticized a lot and can look really beautiful, but in the end, they were criminals and the murderers, and they were breaking the law constantly. So it's an interesting part of our history to see how society dealt with that, and in fact, how they came into being those people, because all of these guys started out really young in crime, and there wasn't a system there to support anything different. So it's an interesting part of history that I'm enjoying exploring more deeply. I've always been interested in it. Definitely have always had a passion for those early years in the 20th century through the 40s. So all of that is very fascinating to me, and I hope you're watching the series because you also enjoy it. We're nearly done with the house and working our way into the cast portion. This video is just a tiny bit longer than I wanted it to be, but there were just, I didn't want to cut anything. I just didn't. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you'll check out the links. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you are my favorite. You're awesome. Tell your friends. There will be a time traveler episode on its way to you in the next week or so. I hope you'll keep your eyes out for that. And until next time, I hope you are happy, safe, and healthy, and that you have a beautiful day.